Good evening, everybody. Welcome to my recital this evening on my fortepiano here. I'm in my studio here in my house. I want to send a special thank you to Professor Namji Kim and to the folks at University of Wisconsin of Eau-Claire. We arranged for this concert to have taken place back in March, way before the pandemic began. So it's been I think a little over a year ago, but we persisted, decided to go through with the concert, and so it's coming on tonight. So, this is, as I mentioned, this is a fortepiano. Fortepiano simply is the word that we have these days to describe an early version of a piano. This is a Viennese style of piano. It's a copy by a man named Gerard Tuinman, Tuinman, of Utrecht, the Netherlands. Well, what's the difference between this and a modern piano? I'll just explain it to you briefly. Talking about the strings, there's mostly two notes, two strings per key, and they're all running parallel, which gives them greater quality, greater clarity of sound, I should say. And both the hammers and the dampers are made out of leather rather than out of felt, which gives them, again, greater clarity and speaking quality. The range of the instrument is only F to F. It's only 5 octaves. So there's a lot of music that you can't play for it after the time of the Viennese classics. And the instrument is not as powerful, certainly, as a modern piano, but it has a lot of advantages that I hope that the music of tonight will help you to understand and appreciate why we would choose to use an instrument like this. The biggest thing that's hugely different for the player is the touch of the instrument is incredibly much lighter than is a modern piano. The depth of the keys as well as the weight is much lighter, so it's very easy to play fast, but it's very hard to play under control. The other thing I want to mention, I was just touching up the tuning literally up to the minute before the concert, as often happens with instruments such as these. So this is not tuned into equal temperament. Every key has its own special quality. So this is C major. And then this is D flat or C sharp major, or F sharp versus F major, or C major versus C sharp major. You can hear how different is the character of those sounds. So when the composer modulates to a remote key, you'll hear kind of a sense of out of tuneness that goes with that. Okay, so much about the instrument now. The music that I'm going to play, there's going to be 2 parts to my recital. I'm not sure if you all have the program, but I'm going to begin with Mozart's very first sonata that he wrote for piano. This is a copy of an instrument from 1785, and these are pieces that are published in 1775, which is only very shortly after the piano really existed in Vienna. So probably many people would have played these pieces on harpsichords or clavichords, and only if they were lucky they had the latest thing. These pieces were published when Mozart was a teenager, and they show his tremendous joie de vivre and his sense of humor, tremendously lively spirits. And I am going to be taking all the repeats in this performance because part of what they used to do is vary the repeats. They would ornament things and play them differently the second time around, which is a great challenge for us nowadays because we have the idea Mozart would have done something, exciting and fresh and lively, but also tasteful at the same time. So it's a tricky kind of middle ground to find exactly the right place to be, but it's a great deal of fun. So I hope you'll enjoy. After this Mozart sonata, I'm going to play a Bach prelude and fugue and then 2 fantasies, and then I'm going to take a short break. So this is Mozart's sonata in C major, K279. Thank you. Okay, there was a fair amount of counterpoint actually in that last movement. It's one of the influences that Mozart certainly received from Baroque composers. Um, Bach was not, J.S. Bach was not an extremely well known composer, oddly enough, at this time. He was really under the shadow of C.B.E. Bach. But I'd like to play a J.S. Bach piece for you, a prelude and fugue, partly because well, it's partly the nature of music of this period. There's a lot of high-spirited, major, happy, comical music of the sort that you just heard. And there are a number of other pieces like that on the program too. So we're going to go into serious mode now with Prelude and Fugue by Bach in G minor from Well-Tempered Clavier, Book 2. Now, Book 2 of Well-Tempered Clavier dates from the 1740s. And this is after, in fact, Bach's first encounter with a piano. Now, it certainly would not have been a Viennese piano. Those were not invented until around 1770. But it was a piano built by Zilbermann, who had studied with the original inventor of the piano, Bartolomeo Cristofori. So it's not likely that Bach would often have played music on a piano, but he certainly was acquainted with it, and he did give it, in fact, his approval. So this is a very, very serious prelude and fugue from Book 2. And after that, I'm going to go directly into Mozart's really brooding masterpiece, his C minor Fantasy, K 475, which was written in the year 1785, which is happens to be the same, exactly the same period as the time when this piano was built. And it's a very powerful piece, and I think you will agree after hearing it that it's incredibly romantic. In fact, there's no feeling of playing it that, oh, it's only Mozart, it's not Chopin or Liszt, there's only so much we can do with the style. In fact, when you have the piano, which is what Mozart had, then you use the most of its resources, and that's certainly a piece that does exactly that. So I'm going to play Bach, Well-Tempered Clavier, G minor Prelude and Fugue, and then Mozart Fantasy in C minor, K 475. Okay, that is the serious part of the program. And while I was playing that, I realized that I didn't get a chance to tell you about the pedals here, which I did use fairly extensively in the Mozart. They're operated not by the feet, as with almost any other piano. This is a very early version. This knee lever here, which I'm not sure you can totally see. I'll just bring the monitor down a little bit. This is that's the damper pedal. Works with the knee. And then there's also the one thing which is not an authentic copy about this instrument, which is this lever here I was pulling in and out, which is called a moderator, which brings a layer of felt between the hammers and the strings and gives them that very special muted sound, which is something that's been more or less lost, unfortunately, in modern piano design. All right, anyway, back to the more normal mode of playing in late 18th century Vienna, much more upbeat, up-tempo, and more entirely comical. I'm actually taking Haydn as a closer, in a sense, in both of the halves of my program. Very unusual thing to do, but I think it works pretty well. Hope you'll agree. This is Haydn's Fantasia in the key of C major, which is entirely full of high spirits and pranks every which way. A couple of things related to this instrument. There are a lot of gestures that go down to the low register in which you have a pause. And while you wait for that note, there are a couple times later in the piece where he tells you just hold this note until the sound has disappeared. So obviously the sound does not last as long on an early piano, and you can get a sense of what that timing might be. The other thing that is completely unique to this period is because of the lightness of the keyboard. It's very easy to just slide your fingers along the keys, and Haydn takes advantage of it, asking you to play 3 octave glissandi at the end of the piece. So that'll be the end of the half. Hope you enjoy. Thank you for tuning in. I'm glad you're enjoying. I appreciate the comments that I see there, but I'm not able to respond to them right now, of course. Why don't you give me about 3 or 4 minutes just to take a pause, and we'll continue. Thank you. Okay. Well, just a little bit of chatter here. The good thing about playing a fortepiano concert at home is you don't have to cope with the travails of moving the instrument and then letting it acclimate to a hall and worrying about if it's safe or if anything's going to happen to it and if the tuning is going to stay put. I did have to turn off my humidifiers in order to give you the best sound that I can here, but I think the odds are that the tuning will last through the program. I'm much more concerned about all these chords and things that I have straight around here. I have not that much room and I'm always afraid I'm going to trip on something, but nothing bad has happened just yet. So, okay, the second half of the program will be 2 pieces. Beethoven Sonata, and then the premiere of the new composition by Sebastian Huydts. Now, one of the projects that was, in addition to the tour of concerts, including Wisconsin Eau-Claire, that were unfortunately canceled or rescheduled to events such as these, one of them that was supposed to have taken place was a series of performances of Beethoven's 3 sonatas, Opus 31. This was, of course, in 2020, which was the anniversary year for Beethoven. And I had students, one was playing the Tempest Sonata, which is the most well-known of the Opus 31 sonatas, and another one playing Opus 31 number 3, which is also a very comical piece, actually, even though this is around the time that Beethoven realized he was going deaf. But the first one, Opus 31 number 1 in G, I was going to play that on this series of concerts at the Toledo Art Museum. But it's been a good experience to get to know this piece. It's one of the lesser known Beethoven sonatas, one of the really difficult ones, actually, I have to say. But one of the ones that where Beethoven shows his impish kind of country sense of humor to the greatest extent. And you just heard one of the pieces which which was from Haydn, where I think he learned it from. Now, this is in the key of G major, and it begins with the hands not being played together. And the whole first movement is kind of a whole comic farce about, going into the wrong keys and, sort of getting upset about things and then coming in the wrong key and then just playing the theme anyway. So part of Beethoven's novel character around this time, where he was sort of pushing into what we now know as his middle period. The second movement, I think, is also very comical in character. I think it's probably a parody of the style of Italian opera. It's very Rossini-like. And I think that was not Beethoven's favorite kind of music, and this movement kind of drones on a little bit. The accompaniments are a little bit, shall we say, very standard and not as imaginative as one would normally expect from Beethoven, and the cadenzas kind of go on and on and on, but there's actually a lovely love scene, and Beethoven makes the best of it. The last movement is based on a tune of folk-like simplicity. It's actually a very, very complex movement to play from a technical point of view, but the overall mood is just very loose, very carefree. And it's a movement of enough substance that Schubert modeled it for the final movement of his great late A major piano sonata. So this is Beethoven's Sonata Opus 31, number 1 in G. Thank you. Beethoven had a very quirky sense of humor, obviously, but a delightful one in that piece. You can tell he was really having a great deal of fun with all those materials. Okay, the final piece of the program is the premiere. Unfortunately, the composer Sebastian Huydts is in Europe, where I think it's something like 3:30 or 4 in the morning right now, but the live stream will turn into a YouTube video that people can watch after the fact, and perhaps he's watching it now, whenever it is. So I'm going to just set up his music in here, and I'll tell you a little bit about it. It began, as so many of these things, as a pandemic project. I met Mr. Huydts at a concert I played at Pianoforte Foundation in Chicago, when I was playing a bunch of Scriabin piano sonatas, and he was, a very noteworthy person in the audience. We talked, it seemed like forever after the concert, because he had such an incredible, wide knowledge of music, just a really interesting person to talk to about so many different kinds of things. Perhaps you can see that on the screen. This is his picture, and just his program notes about the piece. So it was, it was the summer months of 2020, and he was in his apartment in Chicago, and of course there was a very, very severe lockdown and racial protests and all kinds of difficult situations. And so Huydts spent his time at the keyboard with his volumes of the Wiener Urtext edition of Haydn's keyboard sonatas, all of which he was taught when he was a boy. In that Wiener Urtext, there were 3 little incipits, such as the following. That is from the Wiener Urtext. I'll just play it for you very quickly here. And that was written by Haydn. It appears in his thematic catalog, but there's no composition that survives. So the question is, if there wasn't a piece, what can we make out of this material? And Huydts found 3 of these little incipits and wrote keyboard sonatas, which in the early years Haydn called divertimenti, and divertimento. He wrote sonatas very much in Haydn's style. I ran into one of them in Facebook, of all places, and I thought, wow, this is a very rare opportunity. Nobody ever writes new music for this instrument. I'm going to do it. So that theme itself, I'll let him describe it himself. The key is E minor, and the first 2 bars are originally Haydn's. The ensuing work has again been created in the so-called empfindsamer Stil, the sensitive style, guided by studying the CBE Bach Sonata für Kenner und Liebhaber and Haydn sonatas from 1760 to about 1785. And he goes on, I put myself in the position of a young, serious, imaginary student of Haydn in the mid-1780s, assigned to create a 3-movement work based on a theme provided by the maestro himself, with the instruction to create an intense first movement, balanced by a more lyrical second movement and an exciting, joyful third movement to bring the work to an upbeat finish. So that's as much of his introduction as I'm going to quote. I think gives you a good idea. Haydn occasionally quoted, I know this from my Zoom meeting I had with him the other day, he occasionally quoted folk material for no apparent reason, little folk tunes that you recognize, and there's going to be one that pops up in the second movement. See if you will recognize it. And the last movement is extremely difficult. This movement, all the pieces in Haydn style, but I would say, the student of Haydn was a little bit more ambitious as a keyboard player, perhaps, than Haydn was, who was usually catering for amateurs. And it's written in the style hongrois, the Hungarian style, and it's wild and woolly. I hope you enjoy it. Thank you very much. Congratulations to my friend Mr. Huydts. This is a wonderful piece. I hope it has a great future. Thanks to everybody for joining me, and especially to our hosts at University of Wisconsin Eau-Claire, Namji Kim, Nicholas Phillips. Hope to see you all soon in person, as well as so many of the rest of you who tuned in tonight. Really appreciate your support and your interest in this piano and the music for it. Thank you. Have a good night.